The Chronicle of Virulence. For 10,000 years, the Death Guard have mercilessly harried the servants of the false Emperor. They have spread plague and sickness across the stars, wearing their enemies down with relentless determination. They have ruined countless worlds, corrupted and despoiled armies beyond number, fighting the wrong war in the names of Mortarion and almighty Nurgle. Millennium 31. Into Damnation. The Destroyer. Trapped in the warp and ravaged by an incurable, unendurable sickness, Mortarion sells his legions' collective soul in exchange for deliverance from their seemingly endless suffering. Nurgle claims the Death Guard for his own, and the First Plague Marines stride into battle against the servants of the Emperor, emerging from the Immaterium in time to join the invasion of Terra. So begins a war that will last for millennia. Rise of the Plague Planet. Alone amongst the traitor legions, Mortarion's sons retreat from Terra in good order. They leave a path of desecration and atrocity across the Imperium, before finally plunging into the horrific sanctuary of the Eye of Terror. For his victories during the heresy, his unshakable faith, and for the singular achievement of holding his legion together in the face of the Imperium's vengeful ferocity, the Plague God gifts Mortarion with demonhood, and a world to rule over as his own. So is a new Barbarous created near the fringes of the Eye of Terror, a more nightmarish hellscape than even Mortarion's home world once was. Millennium 32 to 41. Time of Remission. Galactic Respite. The Death Guard engage in a series of brutal wars against their erstwhile allies in the Eye of Terror. Though they prevail time and again, this territorial campaign consumes Mortarion's entire focus. Thousands of years will pass in real space, during which the Death Guard are rarely sighted by the servants of the Imperium. Bane of Change. During fighting against the Tzeentchian cultists of the Lost Spiral of Jukadis, Lord Glatox unleashes his feared drone hive. 7,000 fetid bloat drones thrum into battle, shrugging off the agile strikes of disc riders and burning chariots as they close on their target. Ploughing through ferocious enemy fire, the drones shield the lumbering Dark Mechanicum plague bombers at their heart, which rain rot diffusion warheads on the Tzeentchian Twist Shrine and corrode it away to crystalline ruins. The Green Death. The infected orc warbands invading the ecclesiarchy world of Sanctia evince a terrible new barbarism. They fall upon the Plaz defenders and consume them bodily, devouring the living and the dead alike, as if compelled by demonic hunger. Bloating and swelling, the orcs become obese monstrosities that can move only at a snail's pace. Puzzled by this strange reprieve, the Adepta Sororitas systematically purge the orcs with flame and bolter. It is then that Mortarion and the Death Guard of the Seventh Plague make planetfall. The demon Primarch looms over the bodies of the orcs as he stalks to the front lines. At his passing, each greenskin bursts apart in a shower of foul fluids, and dozens of Nurglings spill out from their remains to follow their master. Sanctia falls to the Green Death within 20 hours of Mortarion's arrival, and the plague spreads across the ecclesiarchy-held system. The Smog of War. Victoriums of the Second Plague, including the Rusted Claws and the Tainted Lung, engage the Iron Hands of Clan Kargul and Astra Militarum armoured regiments on Xavier II. As the grinding tank war starts to turn against them, the Death Guard set light to the sprawling chem works of Zarya Secundus. Malignant plague casters channel the resulting flames into banks of corrosive smog that wreath the Death Guard tanks and dissolve the hulls of their imperial foes. Able to withstand the hideous conditions in a way that their enemies cannot, the Death Guard soon crush Xavier II beneath their armoured tracks. The Black Crusades. Over long centuries, Abaddon the Despoiler spends the blood of countless followers in battles against the Imperium. As though seemingly unconnected, each crusade is in truth part of a far grander plan that eventually triggers the opening of the Great Rift. During this period, the new War Master forges numerous pacts with the greatest Chaos powers, amongst them the Death Guard. Mortarian's scorn for Abaddon is obvious, but the Demon Primarch cannot ignore his successes, and so sends warbands of his sons to aid in several of the Despoiler's campaigns. Typhus aids Abaddon more readily, fighting alongside him more than once, and using his attacks upon the Cadian Gate as an opportunity to spread the seeds of the zombie plague far and wide. The Battle of Kornavin. The Grey Knights meet the Death Guard on the planet of Kornavin, the battle representing the culmination of an ancient plan to banish Mortarion forever. The Demon Primarch's might is too great, however. After Mortarion fails Supreme Grandmaster Geronitan in battle, the newly appointed Supreme Grandmaster Drago is forced to work a desperate banishment ritual that hurls Mortarion's spirit into the warp for many years. It is a Pyrrhic victory at best, a respite that Mortarion uses to gather fresh forces and plot his next and greatest invasion of real space. Seed of Doom. Confounded by the magnetropic defense matrices of the Forge World, Takbandahar, an invasion force of the 5th Plague Company is all but annihilated. Only a single Death Guard sorcerer makes it to the Forge World's surface, vanishing into the gloomy surf warrens of the Underfactorums. Summoning demons through ritual sacrifice and desecration, the sorcerer conjures a foul new army whose burgeoning corruption draws yet more of their number through the veil. Their numbers growing exponentially, though the initial Death Guard attack causes the merest pinprick in the hide of this Imperial world, the virulent doom that spreads from it soon sees Takbandahar sicken and die. Millennium 41. Time of Infection. The Siege of Vrax. Several Victoriums deploy into the grinding siege of the cardinal world of Vrax. Descending into the midst of the hideous trench war, the Death Guard unleash virulent bioweapons upon the Imperial forces and begin a chain of events that results in a full-blown demonic invasion. Hive of Horrors. Typhus infests Hive Pandorial with the zombie plague, departing before Imperial retribution can occur. Instead of encountering a hated and ancient enemy, the courageous men of the Necromundan Spiders find themselves plunging deep into the shadow horrors of a hive filled with the shambling corpses of those they came to avenge. Curdled Faith. Attacked by Tau pacification cadres, the Imperial Shrine world of Calendula remains defiant behind their shield of faith. Their defense falters, however, when the world's statues weep tears of filth, and their water sources turn to gelid slime. As battle rages and the body count spirals, hellish portals yawn in Calendula's depths, and the warriors of the 4th Plague Company march out. Led by the Eater of Lives and bolstered by capering demons, they crush both the Imperial and Tau forces to claim the world for Nurgle. Sonorous Entropy. Imperial Navy ships of Battlefleet Obscurus pursue an outnumbered plague fleet through the Cuidus Belt. After a savage battle, the last surviving plague ship manages to perform a full combat drop onto the world of Anverheim before breaking up in the planet's atmosphere. Emerging from their dropcraft, the putrid choir tear their way into Anverheim's polar fortress city, Jotengard, and seize the complex for themselves. Expecting swift victory, wave after wave of Imperial forces descends upon the complex. Each is broken in turn upon the tenacious Death Guard's defences. A prolonged siege develops amidst bitter snowstorms tainted by Nurgle-esque plague spores. And as the fighting stretches into weeks, then months, The putrid choir's entropic dirge echoes endlessly across Jotengard from the fortress's vox emitters. At last, 3 years after the putrid choir first descended upon Anverheim, the remaining Imperial forces, starved, diseased and deranged, flee for the stars, leaving the Death Guard warriors sorely depleted but victorious within their contaminated fastness. Foul cargo. A hauling barge delivering heavy ores to the forge world of Paradax opens its ramp only to disgorge plague marines and bloat drones, led by elements of the Weeping Legion. Bolters roaring, the heretic Astartes smear diseased gore onto the machineries around them, spreading sanguous flux and corrupting the forge world's machine spirits. Leading a growing army of proto-demon engines and possessed servitors, the Weeping Legion begins the grinding horror known as the Paradaxian War. Plague of Shadows. A plague of flies erupts within the war-torn Sekmegara district of Komora. From amidst the fly clouds stride plague marines of the Mouldering Claw, who meet the Drukhari in savage battle before vanishing as mysteriously as they arrived. Several metaphysical plagues emerge in their wake. Stay of execution. On the killing fields of Vindor, the Death Guard decide to allow the last survivors of the Vindorian garrisons to flee, thus spreading Nurgle's gifts of plague and despair. Unwilling to watch perfectly good slaves escape, however, their Emperor's children allies pounce, only for the plague marines to bar their path. A furious battle erupts between the followers of Nurgle and Slaanesh, while the diseased Vindorians scatter to the four winds, taking Nurgle's dubious blessings with them. Millennium 41. Time of Outbreaks. Galactic Epidemic. The great rift thunders into being, reality bursting open like the stitches of a weeping wound to spill warp stuff into the galaxy. Plague fleets strike all across the Imperium, spilling from the roiling warp storms to spread misery and decay. The Plague Wars. As the blackness settles across great swathes of the Imperium, cult activity and recidivist uprisings lead to the demonic infestation of several prosperous star systems to the galactic north of Ultramar. Under the influence of Mortarion, these worlds fall entirely into Nurgle's grasp and become the Scourge Stars, a feculent fortress for the servants of the Plague Father within real space. It is from these super-rated staging posts that Mortarion will launch his campaigns in Ultramar. Reign of Filth. During the siege of Godorian, a world unlucky enough to be within light years of the Scourge Stars, squadrons of plague-burst crawlers lob their shells in high parabolas. The diseased munitions slam down on Manufactorum stack vents and spill their filth in the Godorian labor furnaces to create giant toxic plague sensors. The resultant smog clouds drive the Imperial defenders into the open, easy prey for the guns of the Death Guard. Outbreak Ultima. Mortarium's long-awaited invasion of Ultramar begins. Sepsis cohorts of every plague company join the fight, with the 2nd, 3rd and 7th deploying in almost their entirety. Marching alongside demon Talibans, corrupting renegade knights, traitor Titan legions, and countless warrior bands of renegades, cultists, and turncoat Astra Militarum, the grotesque armies of Nurgle force the beleaguered defenders of Ultramar back step by bloody step. Unholy Endurance. War Badsmack overruns a score of worlds to the galactic west of the Scourge Stars, forcing Mortarion to deploy numerous Victorums to counter its wrath. During the campaign's pivotal battle on Krug's world, Warlord Badsmack himself leads a headlong charge against the outnumbered Death Guard. Lord Fulgus, the Bloated, orders an immediate advance into the teeth of the Greenskin assault, calling down plague burst crawler fire upon his own position. Weathering the pounding ordnance through a mixture of resilience and sorcery, the Death Guard draw the orcs into an explosive meat grinder. Plague spitters dissolve wave after wave of the enemy hordes, noxious Blightbringers told their toxins of misery again and again, driving the green-skinned weird boys insane and spreading despair through the ranks. Finally, Badsmack and his surviving boys flee in abject terror, only to be annihilated by the Plague Marines' pursuing fire. Gifts of Nurgle. On the industrial world of Drogensul, several Vectoriums of the First Plague Company meet stiff resistance from Imperial defenders. Death Guard dropships make repeated passes over the industrial fortress factories, dropping spiked iron cubes the size of hab units that crash down in the streets of manufactorums. Disease radiates from these ruinous monoliths, and the Imperial defenders waste no time in setting charges to destroy them. The true horror of the Death Guard plan is revealed when the charges blow, rupturing the cubes and allowing the tightly packed poxwalkers inside to spill from the wreckage. Within days, the walking pox is rife throughout the fortress factorums of Dragonsul. Only then do the Plague Marines of the First Plague Company return to finish the fight. In the Maw of the Storm. As Warpstorm Formori engulfs the world of Danasar, Typhus duels and humbles Huron Blackheart atop the ruins of the Endless Spire, he leaves the tyrant of Badab alive as an abject lesson not just in Nurgle's might, but also in his generosity. Besieged. Much of the Third Plague Company find themselves besieged within the ruined husk of Hive Octuron on Belissos. Led by Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus, a huge force of Astra Militarum, Battle Sisters, and Imperial Knights hammer the Death Guard position day and night. Yet between the Death Guard's resilience and the screaming volleys of plague-burst mortar shells that are fired in return, it is the besiegers who find their forces ground down, and their warriors riddled with sickness. By the time the Death Guard launch their breakout assault, few of their attackers have the strength remaining to deny them. The Serpent and the Fly. Vectoriums of the 5th and 6th Plague Companies engage in a naval battle with Craftworld Samharn and its fleet around the moons of Bosphodia. Before they are driven off, the Death Guard successfully board the Craftworld and spread their corruption through the territory of Wild Rider clan Siltach. In desperation, Samharn's Seer Council orders ghost warriors to cut that part of the world ship away with weapon fire. So devastating is the despair felt in that moment that it conjures Nurgle demons into the waystones of the surviving Siltach clan members, possessing them and transforming them into aberrant, insectile half-breeds. Soon enough, tales of spiteful, chaos-tainting Elder Eye Corsairs are prevalent throughout the Paragos subsector and beyond. The Grayfax Gambit. Having noted the fanatical obsession the Death Guard hold for the number 7, Inquisitor Katerina Grayfax applies her suspicions to the battle for the shrine world of Dortweir. Launching their final assault on the 7th hour of the 7th day, the Death Guard pursue a baiting force of Primaris White Scars straight into the firing lines of 7 Deathstrike missile launchers. The resultant rad conflagration obliterates the Death Guard presence upon Dortweir entirely. The Pristine Rotting. After enduring months of filth and indignity in battle against a putrid choir, the 14th Volpone Bluebloods can take no more, and beg Nurgle to spare them from the corruption. The Plague God answers, rendering them forever gleaming and pristine, except for every 7th soldier amongst them. These unfortunates endure all the disease and pestilence their comrades should have, bloating into dirt-smeared, infectious spawn, whose forlorn wails and wretched stenches drives the rest of the regiment mad with guilt and horror. The Blue Bloods turn their guns on their former comrades before throwing in their lot with their Death Guard tormentors. Millennium 41. Time of Rotting. Tainted Trophies. During the War in the Rift, Mortarion decapitates the 7 champions of Libria, turning their skulls into virulent death's heads. These he uses to banish the great Kabanda back into the warp, sending him hence with a mocking gift of despoiled skulls, no longer fit for Khorne's throne. The Rust Hounds arise. Amidst the ruins of Chambak, knights of House Krast battle the mechanized infantry of the Pallid Hand. Shrugging off salvo after salvo of blight launcher rounds, the knights trample the Death Guard and claim victory. Yet in doing so, their steeds are infected with ferric blight. What emerges from that festering war zone is a warband of renegade knights rusted through in body and soul. Limbs shrieking and seized, thrones mechanicum tainted beyond recovery. Renaming themselves the Rust Hounds, the knights set off on the hunt for their former allies' souls. Ship of Ill Omen. A battered warship impossibly identified as the long-destroyed legendary Death Guard vessel Eisenstein is sighted beyond the third moon of Lorne's Landing, glowing with a lampant hue before vanishing without trace. Just days later, the Death Guard descend upon Lorne's Landing was Mortarion at its head. Inquisitorial savants note with alarm that this is the sixth such manifestation to herald the coming of the Death Lord himself. They fear what may transpire upon the seventh. The Gorgon's lair. Alongside warbands of the Grieved, the Purged, and several other renegade forces, Typhus leads the First Plague Company in a shocking raid against the Iron Hands chapter planet, Medusa. The clans drive off their attackers, but not before terrible damage is done, leaving regions of the planet as cursed quarantine zones. Deluge of Nebus. As the Death Guard siege of the Imperial Hive world of Nebus reaches its 7th year, Mortarion sorcerers summon an ancient evil to aid them. The strange great unclean one known as Rotigus joins the fight, bringing with him his appalling aura of infernal fecundity. Protein vats in the hives overflow as the flesh broth within them grows at an unstoppable pace, burying entire levels under flabby drifts of bloated meat. Vermin of every sort enter frenzied cycles of birth and death, the Imperial defenders finding themselves overwhelmed by tides of sump rats, infestations of grizzle worms, and million-strong swarms of ravenous ripperjacks. Worst of all is the Deluge of Nurgle, an endless storm of putrid filth water that seethes with infectious bacterial life. Soon enough, Nebus's arid plains become quagmires, then stinking oceans that rise higher and higher. The corpse-choked hive cities flood from the roots upward, their last garrisons fleeing ever higher in search of salvation that does not exist. Blessed beyond endurance by the plentiful generosity of Rotigus and his demons, methodically cut to pieces by the thundering guns of the Death Guard, it is almost a mercy when the last Nebus defenders meet their grisly deaths. A future befouled. A sepsis cohort of the 7th Plague Company strikes at the fortress monastery of the Minotaur's chapter. Their attack is driven off, but celebration turns to despair upon the discovery that Mortarion's sons have tainted the chapter's gene seed stocks beyond redemption. So begins a desperate quest for survival, a crusade across the stars to reach Terra and access purified gene seed reserves before the chapter wastes away. The Ultar Breach. During the Battle of Ultar, Mortarion and his Death Shroud stand unaided in the breach against an entire Necron legion. Death Guard reinforcements fight their way frantically to their lord's side, fearing the worst. Instead, they find Mortarion and his last surviving Death Shroud, wounded but triumphant, and surrounded by sparkling, dematerializing heaps of foes. The Great Brewing. Deep within the Imperium Nihilus, the Poison Chalice invade the Medicae world of Pelusil. They seek to use the planet's macro-alembic complexes to brew the ultimate plague in Nurgle's name. Blighted Resurrection. The Pallid Hand are ambushed by overwhelming Necron forces from the Novok dynasty amidst the ruins of Hollowfall. During a fighting retreat, Mortarian's sons infect a number of Necron warriors with ferric blight. Phasing out, the android warriors bear the deadly contagion back to the stasis crypts of their tomb world, beginning an epidemic of catastrophic proportions. The doom of Hesp. Victoriums of the 4th and 7th engaged the Tyranids of High Fleet Lowtown amidst the steaming jungles of Hesp. When the swarms deploy toxicrenes and venomthropes to poison the environment, the Death Guard respond with plague spells, virus bombs, and demonic diseases. With neither side willing to back down, the atmosphere of Hesp becomes ever more toxic, until the jungles and even the warring armies are reduced to a gory, bubbling soup. The first Tyranid hive ship to taste this poisonous slurry recoils, its proboscis melting, and is bombarded into oblivion by the rest of its fleet. Hesp is left as an endless sea of toxic slime, too virulent for even the hive fleets to devour. Rising God. The Space Hulk Rising God is chosen by the Ferryman to join Mortarian's plague fleets. The Hulk is infested with warring gene stealers and orcs, and so squads of Bright Lord Terminators teleport to key points aboard, bearing ruin-encrusted plague bombs. Fighting their way through tides of foes, the Terminators prime their bombs before the survivors teleport back to safety. Thudding detonations shake the Rising God, disgorging Nurgle's rot, green-lung pox, and Swarmer's scourge amidst its warring passengers. 7 days later, the Death Guard return, wading through deep drifts of rotting corpses to claim the depopulated Space Hulk. Rust and Ruin. During the Firdas season on Dysactis, a vast Death Guard force advances through the pyroclastic storm fronts in search of the Temple of Ascension. They are met amidst a crackling maelstrom by an enormous force of Iron Warriors, supported by corrupted god machines from the Legio Abharax. Continent-shattering battle ensues. Hordes of demons are summoned from the beyond to join the fight. Beneath the gaze of the Cycloniad statues, Mortarion and Perturabo themselves engage in a spectacular duel that lasts for several hours. It is a battle reminiscent of the incredible conflicts of the Horus Heresy, and Perturabo's sons cause terrible damage to the Death Guard forces. Yet the longer the fight rages, the more the contagions and metal-phage poxes of the Death Guard spread through the Iron Warriors' ranks. Ancient heretics sicken and collapse. Malevolent war engines seize with rust and shudder, sparking to a halt. Machine spirits go mad with revulsion and pain, and as the power of entropy and decay run rampant, the battle swings in Mortarian's favor. With his force in tatters and many of his precious war engines crippled beyond repair, even bitter Perturabo is finally forced to concede defeat. Falling back to pre-prepared defense lines, he detonates a series of explosive trenches amidst the raging storms and disengages in the ensuing mayhem. Badly mauled but triumphant, Mortarion and his Death Guard lay claim to the heathen temple they fought so hard for, and the ancient secrets that lay at its heart. Linoxis infested. Leading his favoured Victoriums of the 7th Plague Company, Mortarion attacks Linoxis, the oceanic chapter planet of the Golden Paladins. Timing his attack to coincide with an auspicious sevenfold eclipse, Mortarion has his biologist putrefiers and foul blightspawn poison the planet's seas. Amidst the resultant apocalypse of disease and filth-encrusted horror, the Death Lord leads his sons to absolute victory, opening up a new outbreak within the shadows of the Imperium Nihilus and spawning a dozen plague-ridden war zones.